When Dr. Knapp asked to examine her body, Edward immediately refused to let Dr. Knapp look closer at his wife's corpse, insisting that he should be left alone to grieve the sudden loss of his wife. When questioned about his wife's sudden passing, he would tell Dr. Knapp that he knew nothing about the circumstances that led to her death, as the body was discovered by a boy that he sent to the house for an errand. It was the boy that had found her lying deceased body downstairs. Upon seeing this, the boy ran for help. Edward would state to Dr. Knapp that Elva may have succumbed to an everlasting fit or a heart attack. But the circumstances being as it were, Dr. Knapp could do nothing but catch the glimpse of Elva's face, which he saw that there was a marked discoloration on the right cheek and on her neck, consistent with a blow and strangulation from what he saw from a view, but didn't have anything, but ignored it, thinking that she died of a heart attack. The wake of Edward's erratic behavior raised more suspicion about Elva's death. When Elva's funeral was initiated the next day, he refused to let any of the mourners come close or approach the casket of his deceased wife, and he covered the marks on his wife's neck with a scarf, which he claimed or insisted that it was her favorite to wear, which to her mother she knew that her daughter wouldn't wear such thing. In a sudden moment, her mother had removed a white sheet from the coffin just before her daughter was to be put to bury. What caused her to do this is unknown. Was it female intuition or a whisper from the grave? Whatever compelled her whatever compelled her to recover the sheet, she knew it would prove that something is more at hand with her daughter's case. The first thing that Mary would notice on the sheet she received was the odd odor, which Edward would attribute it to embalming fluid. But she knew the smell was not embalming fluid, but something else entirely. Something indefinable. When she tried to rinse the sheet, the water turned into the color of blood. Scooping some of it out with a jug, she was astonished to see that it was clear as water, despite the water in the bowl being crimson red. The sheet was no longer white, but pink, the color of diluted blood. No matter how many times she scrubbed the sheet and soaked it, the stubborn stain within couldn't be removed. With this, she could only do one thing, and that was to pray. Mary demanded answers, for if it were denied, she would lose her mind from grief and anger. In the following days, when the dying light of day had receded and the shadows lengthened her prayers, her prayers would finally be answered, but not the way she would expect. Within 4 of those successive nights, Elva's spirit would manifest itself in her mother's house and reveal how she suffered at the hands of her abusive husband. On the evening of January 22nd, he had flown into a rage when he learned that Elva didn't cook meat for his dinner. He had beaten her and would eventually break her neck with his bare hands. To prove that this had happened to her, Mary would claim that her daughter's apparition would have her head rotate in 360 degrees, confirming that is how she died. If everyone at the funeral, including Dr. Knapp, examined her body further, they would have seen the bruises and felt the dislocated vertebrae in her neck. But as no post-mortem had been performed, there was no evidence to support Mary's suspicions, other than the accusation of her daughter's ghost. Mary Jane, determined with the evidence she believed could help her daughter find peace, marched to the office of the local prosecutor, John Alfred Preston, and demanded that he put the question to her former son-in-law about the murder of her daughter. Preston couldn't order Edward's arrest based on Mary's hearsay evidence at the best of times, and certainly not that an alleged claim to be provided from a ghost of the recent victim. Preston had his doubts concerning Edward's versions of events, and was too willing to have Elva's body to be autopsied for further conviction. Edward's evident distress at the news seemed to confirm what everyone believed and said to have happened to Elva for many weeks, that Edward had taken her life and was trying to get away with it. The autopsy report from Elva's body would confirm that she died by strangulation, which would give the prosecutor all he needed to convict Edward for the death of Elva. Edward was arrested, and while he paced up and down his tiny cell within the county jail while waiting trial, further investigations began to unearth Edward's dark past. There appears to be proof obtained from 2 earlier marriages that Edward had before Elva. One of the marriages resulted in divorce, while the other one was presumed to be an accidental death of the second wife, who had been killed by blunt force trauma to the head, which Edward claimed she fell down the stairs. Apparently, Edward was married 3 times. His first wife he lost to divorce, and the last 2 were claimed to be accidental or unknown causes of death. But it would prove, however, that Edward had possibly killed his second and final wife, which he managed to get away with his second wife's murder. But when it came to Elva's death, it turned out that Edward would finally be caught and be brought to justice for the deaths of Elva and his second wife.